This is Spotlight from All Things Photonics, featuring intimate sit-down conversations with preeminent figures in our industry. Unscripted, timely, and topical, this series shines the spotlight on industry-leading changemakers from all corners of the photonics landscape, from the gateways of progress to the most impactful challenges of our time.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hamamatsu Corporation, a leading manufacturer of devices for the generation and measurement of infrared, visible, UV light, and X-rays. Hamamatsu is dedicated to the advancement of photonics through extensive research and offers specialized systems for select applications. Visit hamamatsu.com to learn more.
Try new things, and when you find your passion, make it your career. If Garrett Cole could leave only one message with his students, that would be it. Cole's an associate professor at the Wyant College of Optical Sciences. His arrival at the University of Arizona is a return to academia, but Cole has done it all, from working alongside researchers at famed laboratories to turning his studies in cavity optomechanics into his own startup, Crystalline Mirror Solutions. Today, his focus is using semiconductor materials and processing techniques to make ultra-high-performance optics for optical metrology systems. In this spotlight conversation, Cole takes us through his professional journey, talks about his early inspirations, and shares how he hopes to inspire the next generation of photonics professionals. Joining me today is Garrett Cole, Associate Professor of Optical Sciences at the University of Arizona, and a leader in advancements for precision optical metrology. Garrett, thank you so much for giving me the time.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to be here. Happy to join you this morning, Joe.
All right, great. And we want to get into some background first. And you grew up near an active naval base in California, also near NASA Research Center. Did exposure to these kind of facilities shape your aspirations as a kid, and what influenced you to get into this field from the start?
Yeah, so it is amazing, right? Like, depending on where you grow up, you have very different experiences and it might guide you down a different path. But growing up near, it was actually a Naval Air Station Moffett Field, was an interesting experience. Yeah, I was born in '79. And so growing up, this was the early '80s, which was like heightened tension, time frame of the Cold War. And these turboprop P-3 Orion planes were constantly going in and out of that air station, hunting for submarines. And so it's always been, burned into my mind, like this constant drone of those planes flying in and out, 24/7. And actually one of my earliest memories is going to a field trip there. I think they wanted to show kids, like, why were these planes flying over you all day? And it was a really neat experience to see the planes up close, personal, see the buoys they were dropping, hunting for Soviet submarines. They had cross sections of all the sensors inside, and so that was really neat, right? Inspiring for a kindergarten or first grade child. Um, on a more positive note, we were a real short distance away from that air station, and when they had air shows, we could sit right in the comfort of our backyard and watch the planes like fly over. So watch the Blue Angels do their acrobatic tricks right from our own backyard, which was cool. And my dad was non-technical, so he very cool guy, owned a furniture upholstery shop, but he was a tech geek himself, like into Star Trek and stuff. And so annually, NASA Ames would have these open house events, and he'd take my brother and I to check it out. And it was really cool. Again, these were all like early inspiring memories for me. And then the other close family connections I had fairly technically minded family members. So one grandfather was an auto mechanic, one was a tool and die maker, and my stepdad was a CNC machinist. And so those were really nice early experiences that sort of nurtured this love of science and technology. Got to play around with the CNC mill. I got to learn AutoCAD. I got to define tool paths and deburr parts and all this stuff. So, really nice, direct, hands-on technical experience from a young age, and that inspired me to pursue an undergraduate degree in engineering. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do something like chemistry or more like mechanical engineering. And my mom was nice enough to take me to a number of universities and talk to folks and get brochures. And I found this field of materials engineering, which was perfect. It's kind of right in the middle, right? So this happy medium between the more mechanical engineering side and the chemistry and solid state side. So that served me well and was a good fit.
Really cool to hear, and a lesson for all of us with young kids. Expose them to science now, and you can kind of spark this interest and see what comes of it later. So bring that kid to the museum. If you have a local air show, check it out. You
Yeah.
never know what's going to inspire you to shape your future, right?
Yeah, fully agree.
Now, in speaking of kind of like directing people towards science, we hear from all corners of the industry that the U.S. needs more workers in optics and photonics. What do you think can be done to attract more to this field? Do you have to start at that younger age, and what will you tell your students to help them find their way in this industry?
Yeah, so I'll go back to what you touched on. It's really important to start young, right? And it's getting harder these days. So when I was a kid, it was pretty easy just to take stuff apart yourself, rip things apart. You had exposed hardware you could get to. Things are becoming harder nowadays. You probably don't want to take apart this cell phone or laptop or something. The other challenge is there's just, less and less domestic manufacturing jobs. So like they may not have the experience I had, but it's like, CNC machinists in the family and stuff. And so I'd like to see more, after school activities, almost like maker fair kind of things for kids to do these things, right? In a safe environment, have access to tools to really just work with their hands and be inspired to like see physical hardware, take it apart, build it, and so on. Going a level up from there. So of course, key is to inspire people as young as possible and get them interested in these fields. Um, on the sort of talent pool employee side, there's definitely challenges with getting folks in the technician or operator level. And so that's been a real challenge. There is a lack of engineers and PhD level scientists, but I think it's even more of a pain point at the technician training level. And so it's usually on the burden of the company to have to pull people in and train them up, right, from a base level. But I do see some really nice bright spots. So I want to give some shout outs to programs I've seen. So local here in Santa Barbara, there's a program called CC Prime, which is a collaboration between the Santa Barbara City College, like a local junior college, Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria, and then UC Santa Barbara. And then this really nice program where they provide the students with access to a nanofabrication facility. It's a clean room technician training program. And so they get to learn the basic ropes, like this nice foundational knowledge of working in a clean room, the basic process steps. And at the end of that, they can get certified, right? That they have this background knowledge. And I think it works two ways. One, again, it puts them on a nice career path. But two, they also get to see hands-on, is this something they want to do, right?
Mhm.
Because not everyone wants to go in the clean room and gallon up, right, and do that work. And it's better to find out in training rather than on the job. So that's been a fantastic program. Again, I want to give a lot of credit to Demis John, who's been spearheading that locally. And especially it helps areas like Santa Barbara, where there's a small talent pool in this domain, in this topic. So you either end up again having to train people yourself or poach them from other companies, which can be quite frustrating. So if you can build that funnel or that pipeline of technicians, that's great. And I'll very briefly mention two other similar programs I've seen. So near the Thorlabs headquarters in Newton, New Jersey, Sussex Community College has a like an optics technology training program. So train opticians for polishing, inspection processes, and so on. And there's another similar program at Front Range Community College in Colorado, which is a laser and optics technology training program. I think this is, we need more of these like vocational technician training programs. Um, the final part of the question, what would I want to instill in my students? Really just like lifelong love of learning. I have had a very diverse career path. So, finished my PhD, worked at a startup, worked at a national lab, worked abroad for 5.5 years. Um, then started my own company, which was acquired by a larger company, and now I'm returning to academia. I think it's really beneficial to see all sides of these things. You get a little bit of this, like, I don't want to say animosity, but competition between, say, industry and academia, where people kind of talk down to each other. And at a more micro level, like theorists and experimentalists and so on. And I think it's really useful to just leverage the good and bad, the pros and cons of these two sides, right? But it's also important to see them or to be able to get direct experience again in academia and industry and know what the strengths and weaknesses of each are. So yeah, I would push students to like maybe take this non-traditional career path, see both sides, be open to new opportunities, and really push yourself outside your comfort zone. Move out of your city, move out of the state, try something new. Like for me, that was a big move from California to Vienna, but it taught me a lot about myself and I gained a lot of confidence in that process.
Yeah, I don't think you can really underestimate, being open to new experiences. And I think a big takeaway is just exposure to, kids and young professionals alike. Just, here's this whole industry you might not be thinking of, but if you have a curiosity to seek more knowledge, there's a lot of great things to be done in this field.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that again where part of the CC Prime program is that students go through this training program, and then there's an open house day where they get to visit local photonics companies. And there's because UCSB is a strong photonics hub, it's a lot of small startup companies or some larger, even defense contractors like Teledyne FLIR, Raytheon Vision Systems, and so on. And they get to then tour these facilities during this open house event. And most of them are unaware this even exists, right? Totally local to them that there's these like really high technology photonics companies in town. I think things like these are extremely important, right? To just make the industry more visible.
Yeah, yeah, like that exposure. And you mentioned before too, kind of in your your trek and your journey, some of your time at different labs. And tell me a little bit about your work at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and what did that opportunity expose you to?
Yeah, I'm going to go back just to give a little bit of context. So I mentioned I did materials engineering for undergrad, so at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and then ended up going to grad school at UC Santa Barbara, continuing in material science and engineering, and worked on dissertation research was on electronic and photonic materials. And I specifically had made these micromechanically tunable lasers for telecom applications at the time. This is from 2001 to 2005. It's amazing that it's coming up on 20 years since I finished my PhD. And then after finishing at my PhD at UCSB, took a position as the first employee at a small startup company called Aries Photonics, which was a fantastic experience. I was only there for a year, admittedly. The company went on to be quite successful, was acquired by FLIR. But that first year was really valuable to see, like building something from the absolute ground up. So continued some elements of my dissertation research there, learned a lot about what it takes to start a new venture. And then for personal reasons, my now wife and I moved up to the Bay Area, and I took this position at Lawrence Livermore. And that was a return to a more academic, like research focused position. And Livermore is, fantastic facility. Obviously, I started in fall of 2006. And at that time, there was roughly 9,000 total employees, including contractors. So it's a huge facility. So I like to describe it as kind of like this circus of science. There's just everything going on there. And, Crown Jewel is this national ignition facility, the inertial confinement fusion laser facility. But then you have everything from like chem biodetection to combustion modeling efforts. And so that was another example where I got exposed to a lot of really cool things. So I worked on various optical sensors for pressure, force load sensing. I worked on plasma diagnostics for a railgun experiment. I worked on these fiber probes for measuring detonation velocity and within the high explosives application facility. And then I kind of went back to doing the work I've been doing during my PhD, which was these micromechanically tunable lasers. And the cool aspect of my job there was I was a postdoctoral staff member, and I was in this unique program. I'm not sure if it still exists, but it was called Engineering Relationships with Academia. And the whole mission was to build bridges with academic groups. And so 50% of my time I could do just blue sky research, which was fantastic. So lots of freedom, had access to this really nice clean room facility. And like I said, I continued some of the work I'd been doing during my dissertation. And as a little aside, these are these micromechanically tunable lasers where you have like a little trampoline mirror that you can move up and down. And this is very small. It's like a micron scale structure. It weighs hundreds of nanograms. And if I pump this laser hard, you could actually see the mirror move. And at first I thought it was some thermal effects or something. As I dug deeper, I found out it was actually the light pushing this mirror around. And that was super fascinating, like intellectually stimulating to imagine like the light is moving this object, right?
Hmm.
And so given the nature of my position, I had a lot of freedom. I started looking around, like, what could you do with this? What are interesting aspects to this? And I stumbled upon this nascent, like emerging fundamental physics field called quantum optomechanics. And I one challenge there was I was in an engineering group, so the Center for Micro and Nanotechnologies at Livermore tried to get funding internally to push this, and it was deemed just too fundamental, right? Just too basic research. But then that prompted me to look for other external partners. Like I said, my mission was to connect with academic groups, really push basic research. Um, and so I just made a cold call email to a group of the Austrian Academy of Sciences. I didn't know them. I had no connections to make introductions. I just sent a message out of the blue and ended up getting a positive response back. So I wrote this guy, Marcus Asselmeyer, his postdoc, Sylvain Guigon, and the head of the institute at the time, which is Anton Zeilinger. And yeah, within a couple of weeks, they wrote back and had a positive response and sort of nurtured this really neat collaboration between Livermore and their group in Austria. And so, yeah, summary there was Livermore was a fantastic experience. It's a, really diverse set of, technologies that they're pushing, a fantastic research lab. Really, yeah, a fantastic place to work, I would say, if anyone has the opportunity.
And I think that's really cool. You mentioned too is that you just had this curiosity and thought, well, let me just shot in the dark, reach out to this group in Austria and see if we can set something up, and just open to it. And then all of a sudden, just your curiosity forms this collaboration now that may not have happened otherwise.
Yeah, and I definitely motivate people to do that more. Like earlier, we were talking about NASA Ames. The first engineering job I had was at NASA Ames as a summer intern between my third and fourth year of my bachelor's degree, and that was another one where at the time I sent a fax, which will break things, but I just sent a random fax to HR, called them shortly after, asked if they'd seen this fax and were they open to hiring summer interns. And my family lived conveniently close by, I can drive 10 minutes to get there. And it worked out, right? In the absolute worst cases, they just ignore it or they say no. And I'm
Right.
back where I started, right? And so, yeah, that group in Austria, I was fairly direct about, hey, the work you're doing is amazing. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I would propose we could pursue. And yeah, it takes receptive people, obviously, to respond to
Mhm.
that positively. But I'm very glad I did it. And it doesn't hurt to try, right?
I think that's an awesome lesson, not just for the students to, try and further their career, but really for anyone. If you're, take a leap to ask, no harm. You're not committing anything that you're going to lose and, suffer a setback from. But hey, why not inquire and say, what are your thoughts on this? Shoot your shot, kind of.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I want to get to your work and your work on low loss single crystal mirrors. It started getting attention, and you ultimately made the leap to found crystalline mirror solutions. And we talked a little bit earlier about what it means to build something from the ground up. So talk to me a little bit about how that came to be and what that experience was like.
Yeah. So I'll go back to where, I sent this cold call email, had this roughly year of collaboration between Livermore and the group in Vienna. It was worked out really well. Sometimes these things they work out even faster than you think. So we got some nice results. We had some early publications. Um, the group was fantastic to work with. My wife and I, on a personal vacation, made a little side excursion detour to Vienna to visit them, and then started discussing possibilities for moving there full time, right? To focus on this. And it was a very good period of our lives. Like we were in those early discussions, we were 28, going on 29 years old. We didn't have kids. We didn't own a house. So we were as flexible as we were ever going to be. So we had this discussion like, should we try this? Are we are we open to do this? Because we'd both always only lived in California. And so that was going to be a big change, right? To move to Central Europe, landlocked, not near the beach. And yeah, so we decided that it would be if we were going to do it, now would be the time to do it. And it was also very nice having like a supportive partner in that, right? It'd be that much more challenging to go by yourself. So we made the leap and moved together in September 2008 to Vienna, and then I continued this cavity optical mechanics work, that I mentioned. So basically, this little trampoline moving mirror I described, you're optimizing that, and then you're using this tool set of AMO physics to basically cool this device. At the time, the goal was to cool this to its quantum ground state. And then from that point, you could do very interesting quantum optics or fundamental quantum physics experiments with these devices. And that group in Vienna was just an amazing hub of quantum optics research in Europe and worldwide. I mean, or the proof is, Anton Zeilinger won the Nobel Prize in 2022. He was head of the institute when I was there. Um, so yeah, it seemed like a very interesting place to go. Vienna is an amazing city with an amazing quality of life. And so, I was pushing this research there. And this is another one of those, just sort of be open to outside influence or whatnot. So at the end of my stint at Livermore and in Vienna, I'd get these random pings from folks from the precision metrology community saying, hey, if you could scale up those mirrors you're building from these little 50 micron size up to really bulk optics, there'd be some very cool advantages. And I worked with Marcus Aspelmeyer at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, then University of Vienna. And Marcus was seeing the same thing. He was talking to folks and they were saying, hey, if you could scale these mirrors up, that would make a big impact. If you hear this once, maybe it's interesting. You hear it a couple times, it's becoming a trend. And then you heard it a handful of times. It's like, maybe we should take this seriously. So for about 2 years from 2010 to 2012, started developing a process to scale those mirrors up. And the challenge is normally when you make a precision laser optic, you make a high reflectivity laser mirror, you take a nicely polished base substrate, and then you would directly apply via a deposition process an optical coating onto that surface. So you're effectively spray coating this mirror onto the surface of that substrate. And so there's these evaporation or sputtering processes to do that. And the structures that I was using were these single crystal materials, and you cannot directly grow that single crystal on these optical substrates. So you can't take a piece of glass and do, semiconductor or crystal growth on that surface. So you now need to separately grow the crystal and then come up with a way to integrate that with the optical substrate. The benefit here is in grad school, I had performed similar processes. So I had done or had experience with these direct bonding processes. So I'd come up with this idea that we'll separately grow the single crystal multilayer. We'll use a bonding-based technique to transfer it onto the optical substrate, and we'll make a mirror out of that. And it's easier said than done. It took 2 years to develop that process. But in the end, I could go from these 50 micron scale devices up to these, inch scale optics. And so that was very exciting to see that it worked. And now here's where you have to leverage your network or leverage outside capabilities. So I could make these mirrors in Vienna. We could do very basic characterization of the mirrors there, but we couldn't build full systems to really prove their performance advantages. And here I'll give a little bit of explanation because it's a niche topic. But the aim is with these mirrors, you're trying to eliminate what's known as Brownian noise. So it's amazing what humans can do. So you can build an optical resonator, right, which is two mirrors facing each other where the light bounces back and forth. And you can work very hard to remove all the excess noise from that system. So let's say your aim is, I want to make the most stable resonator possible. So I can decouple it from the environment and put it on some like low vibration mount and do some active processes to eliminate the vibration. I can control the temperature. I can do all these steps to make this thing sit nice and still and quiet, remove all these little perturbations. But ultimately, at some point, you're going to see the random fluctuations of the atoms that make up that mirror, which is incredible to think about, right? So this is the Brownian motion, the inherent thermomechanical fluctuation of those mirrors. And if you're careful in material selection for making those mirrors, you can reduce the magnitude of that motion. So that's the problem we were trying to solve was, okay, if we integrate these single crystal materials for a given frequency range, we could suppress this motion. We can make the most stable resonator possible, which then allows you to make low noise lasers for optical atomic clocks and for neutral atom quantum computers and for really high-end spectroscopy applications. So, I could make the mirrors, I could qualify they had good optical performance, but I could not make those measurements of this like fundamental Brownian noise. And so here Marcus made a connection with Professor Jun Yi, who is just a world, internationally renowned AML physicist in Boulder, Colorado. So he's at JILA, this joint institute between CU Boulder and NIST. And June was willing to take the risk, take these unknown mirrors into his lab, assign a postdoc and graduate student to make these measurements. Obviously we had some supporting data for why we thought these would be better. but we had to prove it, right? And so it took this just fantastic partner in June to make these measurements to show that these mirrors had some advantage. Um, and in roughly late 2012, we got initial results. It looked extremely promising. We had confirmed we could maintain this nice performance in these big mirrors, which was the same as we saw in the little tiny micromechanical mirrors. Um, and through word of mouth, other people heard about this, and then we published a preprint paper, and folks started coming out asking for these mirrors, right? And at first it was like, okay, yeah, we'll have a research collaboration, and we'll make you some mirrors. And at some point, this is no longer a research project when people keep requesting the same parts, right? So I met with the tech transfer office at the University of Vienna, and I had some concerns. It's a very niche topic, right? Like, it's not going to be a consumer product, right? To make a low Brownian noise cavity. But they had really good advice. And it was, look, at the very least, you could run this as a side business, right? You could set this up, make some sales, see where it goes. And it seemed low risk because we had initial direct interest. We had potential to get funded projects. And so, yeah, made the leap and founded a company. And here I'll go back to, I had worked for a year at this company, Things Photonics. It was founded by this guy, John Geske and Michael McDougall. And it was fantastic watching them, build this company from zero, like this fully bootstrapped, organically grown company. So I knew what I was getting into. And there's pros and cons. It's a fun experience, but it's it's very hard work. You are doing everything from you can get a cool title, you're CEO, but at the beginning you're simultaneously janitor, admin, sales, CDO. So, but at least I had seen that, right? So I knew what I was signing myself up for. And like I mentioned, this started out as, okay, we'll run this on the side. I still have my position at the university. So this is de-risk to some reason. But from there it grew. And by late 2013, it became clear, like, I have to choose one or the other. I can't stay at the university uh, it- or I have to give up on the company or jump full time into the company. It was becoming all encompassing. So yeah, that was the point at which I had to make the decision and decided to jump into the company to build it up full time.
Yeah, and what's that like? Because you talked about naturally businesses and academia can butt heads. So what's it like when you are in the midst of making that kind of transition yourself?
Yeah, so I've had good experiences again with tech transfer offices. So at the University of California, again with that company Arius or with IP I generated, they were very supportive. And it was similar in Vienna. I would say they were a little less mature in that process. But I could also, they were very open to work with me. And I would tell them my experiences in the US. And so, again, they were very much supportive of starting this up while uh, giving me the freedom to maintain my academic job at the time. Um, and if we use shared facilities, obviously we paid a recharge fee, and you had to have clear distinction between what was the company work and what was
Hmm.
university work. And so that worked out well. I didn't really see major issues there. The one challenge we did encounter, though, was it just depends on your mindset. But for the work I was doing, you need a clean room, like you need a microfab facility, and that was where there was a major challenge. The facility I worked at in Vienna was not amenable, not open to doing commercial work. And so this was a hard and fast rule at the time. And so that became a major challenge. That was different from what I had experienced in Santa Barbara or other, like Stanford, Berkeley, other open, like, shared research facilities. And that actually drove a major life decision at that point was, right, piece together ways to do the production outside of Vienna, but it was very burdensome. And so in early 2014, decided to move back to California and then just run fab at the UC Santa Barbara nanofab facility. So there is, like you said, a little bit of butting heads. It just depends, right? If
Hmm.
I think it's definitely becoming better now, where universities are more open to supporting these things and growing them. That's been a long term trend in the U.S. And maybe other locations are changing their mindset on that. But I would say University of Vienna was supportive, Tech Transfer Office was supportive. There were just some challenges with that specific fab facility. But then it was easy to come back to California, set up, ramp up, and run fab here. And so again, although it was a niche topic, we ended up growing to more than a dozen people with solid recurring revenue. And it grew much more than I would have expected at the beginning, given that it was a narrow field.
And going now into what you're working on today, using semiconductor materials and processing techniques to make ultra high performance optics for optical metrology systems. What are the current technical challenges there? Some of the trends that you might be eager to advance or to use as a springboard, maybe for your research efforts in Arizona.
Yeah, I really like that question. And go back again to a little bit of context. So had grown crystalline mirror solutions to the point where, you know, it was successful, but like I said, niche. And so one avenue I was looking for is, could we find a strategic partner? Would we be a good addition to a larger entity's portfolio? And in those discussions, had reached out to Thor Labs. There, it was a bit easier. I had a long-term connection with Alex Cable, the founder of Thor Labs, from some prior work on these tunable lasers, sort of extension of work I was doing in grad school that I pursued at Livermore. And in those discussions, I'll make it obviously much shorter. Uh, Thor Labs ended up offering to acquire Crystalline Mirror Solutions, and in December 2019, we were acquired by Thor Labs and became Thor Labs Crystalline Solutions. So clearly, we continued with the commercialization of this, foundational technology, these substrate transfer crystalline coatings, and a big benefit of being part of Thor Labs was obviously additional resources in a much larger company. Going from a dozen people to a company that's nearly 3,000 people brings with it a lot more capabilities. So a nice thing there was we were able to step up from doing discrete devices to working towards more integrated systems, like fully assembled cavities, to cavities in vacuum chamber with temperature control and active pumping and so on. We could also leverage strategic partners of Thor Labs. Like, we had really nice, that integrated system that I described was work we pursued with the company Menlo Systems. And so, yeah, the routine production of the near infrared mirrors was set. These are sold out of the catalog now. You can buy them. And then to your question about, what were technical challenges or technical topics we were pushing on, one was extend the operating wavelength of these devices. So, we covered the 1 to 1.5 micron wavelength range. Again, you can buy these as standard products out of the catalog. And we wanted to push into the visible, so shorter wavelengths, or push into the infrared region, longer wavelengths. The visible is still an open work in progress. There's some challenges there, but have seen some nice results. So there's a path to make an impact. The long wavelength side, we've had much better outcomes. So we've made now the highest reflectivity, lowest optical loss mirrors ever in the 3 to 5 micron wavelength range. And there's a path to keep doing this out in the long wave range. So you'll see new products coming out in this domain from Thor Labs on these ultra low loss, roughly 4 to 5 micron sound wavelength mirrors for trace gas detection and spectroscopy. So that's been a really exciting, research effort that's now bearing fruit. Um, that's Another similar topic is size scaling. So we made, centimeter scale, inch scale optics, and now we've had a long running research effort with LIGO to push to much larger mirrors. Over the last 10 years, we went from 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, and now 8-inch diameter, so 200 millimeter diameter optics, which is, it's amazing to think, we've gone so far in the last, the first mirrors were demonstrated like 13 years ago. So of these crystalline coatings. And so that is definitely one topic I would like to continue to push, especially there, because it's not a great, business case to make mirrors for gravitational wave detectors. That's a small market, if you can imagine. So, and it also it goes well with the focus at Wyant College of Optical Sciences, University of Arizona. I mean, they're making giant meter class, mirrors for these imaging telescopes. But I still see a lot of synergy with, they'll probably laugh at me at first when I'm talking about like 30 centimeter diameter mirrors. But there's a lot of precision engineering necessary to make these, because the requirements are daunting, right? Like ultra high optical performance over these fairly large areas. So that's one direction I'd like to push. I'd also like to kind of return to my roots in
Hmm.
semiconductor lasers. So leveraging the expertise I built up over the last 15 years on these direct bonded transfer devices for novel laser architectures, and then going back to the technology that brought me to Vienna, returning to this cavity optomechanics space. And yeah, there had some long-standing collaboration with folks like, Gizmo Bobla at MIT and Thomas Corbett at Louisiana State University. And there's also a nice cohort of folks at University of Arizona working on this. So Dahl Wilson, Felipe Guzman, currently Matt Eichenfield. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to returning to more fundamental basic research at the university.
That's great, and a chance to work with some younger minds that may be kind of young and hungry, right? So you lived that, you saw that, so to with those graduate students and postdoctorates, so there to kind of help them maybe find some direction in that.
Yeah, and it goes both ways, right? Like, I'm very excited at the novel ideas that they'll come up with, right? I'm getting stale. I've done this for a long time. So it'll be nice to see, like, what they propose is just, off the wall novel directions to push these things. So I'm quite excited.
That's great. That's great. And I want to ask, and this is a very broad question, but it's always interesting to get this kind of insight. Talk about some of the challenges facing this industry, and some of the things that you are excited to address in a kind of a broad sense.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely covered this earlier, but I would like to, outside of research, push on workforce development efforts. So expanding beyond, I gave these specific examples of CC Prime or the efforts at Sussex Community College and Front Range. I'd like to see hubs set up where you have these technician training programs, and so that would be on the workforce development side. And yeah, I like doing outreach activities, trying to, as we talked about earlier, inspire young students to go into these, you know, STEM fields, which is a hot topic right now. But I'd like to see real practical hands-on efforts for folks to get this exposure, because again, I feel if you don't have that, it's challenging to just, you know, from a very theoretical point of view, describe why these are cool activities. But doing it hands-on, I think, makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's certainly it kind of helps it connect better when there's almost something tangible to see and to bear witness in person. And it's funny, my son, if I'm working from home, he'll see me on my laptop and he wants to get involved. And he's going to turn 5 tomorrow, so he's not
Nice.
very deep in physics.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Daddy, I'll go to photonics with you. I'll do photonics. Like, let's do work. I'm like, okay, yeah. So even just a vague introduction to lasers, maybe I can spark something, and build off of that.
No, and I definitely want to push for people or motivate people to open up their labs. Obviously, if they can,
Hmm.
like I said, we've had these open house events for this city college in town. I've even invited friends, families, or high school kids or middle school kids that are interested. Like, check out a laser lab. Obviously, laser safety, turn off lasers, do everything you need to do. But um, again, I think it's just inspiring to see these things, even if they understand 1% of it, right? Just to see all of this cool tech set up and give them, as best of a description as you can of what you're doing and, what they could potentially do is very interesting. So I would like to see more people doing that.
And my last question for you, because did varying students sometimes, in one ear and out the other. You hate to think that, but if you had one lesson or one experience that you would pass on to your students that you really hope, like if you're going to take anything away from this, take this. What is that one lesson?
I'm gonna make it 2, but
Okay, sure.
be open to new adventures or new ideas. Keep an open mind, like we talked about. It was an amazing experience to move and work abroad, right? And if you have these opportunities, or if you can make that happen, try to do it. That's one fantastic aspect of these advanced science and technology fields. It's very international, and it does give you the ability to do these sorts of things, right? To move abroad, right? And you can get I had a special Forscher, like researcher visa that brought me to Vienna. And so if you can find these opportunities, be open minded and just give it a shot. You can always come back, right? You can try it for a year and see how it goes. But I would like to motivate folks to try that. And then my other point would be just find and pursue something you're passionate about, because you're going to have a job unless you win the lottery or come from great generational wealth. So, the bulk of your time is going to be spent on that job. So make sure it's something that you enjoy doing, something that you're motivated to pursue. So those are my 2. I cheated. I apologize. But
No, that's fine. We'll bundle them up, and I think that's probably a good thing for anyone. Give it a shot. Find what you love.
yeah,
And I think finding
classic.
what you love is probably part of giving it a shot, right? Because how else are you going to get there?
Yep, yep, exactly.
Garrett, thank you so much for giving us the time and the insight. And we'll, stay in touch and see what kind of research you're working on. Thank you again.
No, thanks, Joe. That was a very fun discussion.